And hello, welcome to the latest Content Club Pep Talk. Today we have Leah Lockhart. But before we get on to that, I just again want to say thank you for Content Design London for making these pep talks happen. And they're great. Search them on the internet, buy the books, and go on the courses. So I'm going to introduce Leah. It's a bit weird. I've known Leah for 15 years. First met Leah when she was setting up some kind of resource on the internet when I worked for Shelter. Then met her again around 8 years ago when she was a mentor at a hackathon that we ran. And then we became co-parents of a dog. So it's over to Leah to wow you with her pep talk. Leah.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to this session. I think for a lot of us, it's directly after work, which can be quite jarring. So thanks for extending your day a little bit longer. We have a lot of really nice, quiet reflecting and writing time during this session. So hopefully that kind of softens you into your evening. I'm going to share my screen, which I always do in the wrong way. So let's see if I can get this right. I don't know if people have come in since I shared a link to a Miro and a link to a slide deck, but hopefully Tom and Mia, if you can keep an eye on people coming in throughout. I'll be talking to the slides as we go through the session. You can use the Miro board if you want. You can write directly on it. You can copy the frames. However you want to work through the session is absolutely fine. If you're not using Miro, I'll just be verbally sort of walking through the slides as we go along. Okay, let's see if your auntie can do this properly. All right. Now I can't see anybody on the call, so can someone tell me verbally if the slides are appearing?
I can see them.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And you can follow along on your own. You've got the Google link if you want to do that as well. There are some speaker notes as we go through. I'll be referencing some material from elsewhere, and all the links to those things are in the slide speaker notes. Okay, so we're here to talk about setting boundaries and intentions, and then starting to draft your own professional manifesto. And I'll go into what all that means in a minute. This session is in 4 parts. I'll do an introduction to myself and then go into this idea of a scope of practice. So a designer's scope of practice and professional boundaries linked to that. We'll then have some time to start drafting a professional manifesto. And at the end, I'll open the room and we can have a discussion about how we found all of this. Was anything surprising? What did you create? And that sort of thing. This session was inspired by an article that K.A. McKercher wrote a little while ago called "Why Designers Need a Scope of Practice." And it was one of those things that really impacted me, really affected me immediately, because it's such a simple thing K.A. was inviting us to do, and I'd never done it before. So I'm wanting to share this with people, and I've built on it a little bit for this workshop, and I hope you find it as impactful as I did. And I was also inspired by Nesta's Collective Intelligence Manifesto Toolkit. And that is what it sounds like. It's a toolkit for you to build a manifesto with other people. And I've just taken that idea and modified it and scaled it down for individuals to do some kind of manifesto drafting. We only have an hour. This could easily be a half-day session. So Tonight is very much about getting you started thinking about all of this, about your boundaries, about your professional scope of practice, and then hopefully get you sort of inspired to do the creative work of writing and creating a manifesto. And this is not a classroom, so I will be giving you prompts and guiding you through some ideas, but if you want to go off-piste or if you have another inspiration, do that if you'd like. Otherwise, you can follow my prompts strictly if you'd like to do that. So I'm Leah. I live in Glasgow, and I am one of 4 worker owners of a small cooperative called Fractals, and we're a design consultancy cooperative. And I also do freelance work. And my paid work is mostly as a facilitator, workshop designer, user researcher, other types of qualitative research, a critical friend and a learning partner. And none of these things sit in isolation. I'm really lucky to do types of work that brings all that together. It's my understanding that squiggly career paths are shared as a kind of tradition at Pep Talks. So at a very high level, I'll run you through my squiggly career path. I graduated high school in Arizona. I grew up in the Southwest United States. I graduated high school in the mid-90s, and I went straight to work. And my substantive, most impactful work I did out of high school was in community-based sexual and reproductive healthcare services. One of them is a place you may have heard of called Planned Parenthood. And the other is a charity that doesn't exist anymore called AIDS Project Arizona. I didn't go to college or university for quite a while, and I entered university as a mature student. And I think because I waited to go into higher education, I did quite well. So I had great grades, and my university in Arizona said that because of my grades, I qualified for an exchange program. And for whatever reason, I chose to drop myself in Edinburgh and go to Edinburgh University. It was quite a shock. But I did a year there, and I did a year at Strathclyde University. I came here in 2001, and I've hardly been home since. I am a naturalized British citizen, and I am on the last leg of the process to renounce my American citizenship. So I'm nearly fully a British citizen now. When I left Strathclyde, and I have a lot of years of college and university under my belt, but I don't have a degree. I needed to go back to work again after Strathclyde, and I really wanted to get back into sexual and reproductive healthcare services, but there's no equivalent to something like Planned Parenthood here. I did find, though, that there was a unique service in Edinburgh, and at the time it was called the Edinburgh Homeless Practice, and it sounds like what it is. There are a lot of reasons mainstream GP practices exclude some people from their waiting, or from their lists, from their waiting rooms. We had this practice in Edinburgh that was for people who had no fixed address, but also just had a way of presenting themselves that they were often excluded from GP practices. So we were in service to those people. I met somebody in that job who worked for Edinburgh Council, and we got on really well. And he said, I'm drafting the homeless prevention strategy for the city, and I have this sort of admin assistant role coming up. Would you like to go for it? And I did. So I entered Edinburgh Council for quite a few years through homelessness services and homeless prevention. And this was in 2010, 11-ish, when public services were starting to get websites and, oh my God, social media, and they didn't quite know what to do with it. And I was part of a group of people in the city who were really excited about the opportunity for social media and the growth of social media and the access to it for councils and public services to interact with citizens. And so I got involved in digital engagement in all different manner of ways, sort of external facing, internal facing. And through that, I met lots of different people doing lots of weird and wacky and wonderful stuff with digital for government. And I found my way into contracting and freelance work, mainly focused on user research. I guess I'll use that as an umbrella term for lots of qualitative stuff I was doing. And now I part own a cooperative and do freelance work as well. So very, very squiggly. Okay, so we're going to get to the meat of the session today. I want to talk about why boundaries and having a scope of practice matter. Again, this was a very impactful journey that KA started to send me on, starting with something I guess I always knew, but I hadn't put words to, is that design roles and ethics are not overseen or licensed. None of us in UCD, as a UCD professional, are licensed. We don't have oversight like other, excuse me, other caring professions do. So this means we're not required to meet certain standards. We're not required to maintain our professional development. We're not required to demonstrate reflective practice. We're not working to a defined code of ethics. We don't get regular practice appropriate supervision. While that all sounds really hair-raising and a bit dire, what it means is that we can define that for ourselves. So setting boundaries in a scope of practice can help us put and articulate what our own ethical boundaries are and what we want to do to develop as professionals. Having boundaries in a scope can help us communicate our skills and our standpoints to colleagues. So designers are often working project to project with different stakeholders, different lines of management, different team members. Having clear boundaries and a scope of practice can help you clearly communicate how you work, what you do, what you don't do. And that's especially useful in teams or organizations with less design maturity. Some of you may have also in the past done a manual to me. So I think what we're doing tonight is a really good complement to something like that. Having a scope and boundaries can also help you identify and minimize risk around things that may need a specialist skill. So because we have no real professional standards in design, we have a variable understanding of UCD and the teams that we go into, designers can overstate their skills and abilities and experiences. We may be asked to do things that we are not trained to do, and that could be quite unsafe. We can identify risk in an ask or minimize risk around work that might start to edge on things that are outside of our skill sets. And if we have a clear scope, clear boundaries, we can start to articulate that to other people. And I've chosen to take us on a journey to a manifesto because it's just I think a nice creative way to articulate the boundaries and the scope. But however you choose to articulate your boundaries, having that down, written down, something that you tangibly can hold or something that you can access in your files can give you something to go back to when something feels a bit off at work, if your spidey senses are going, if something feels a bit, you've got big feelings about it, you're not quite sure what that is. Having all of this down and articulated is something that you can go back to and check in and see, what is it that I'm feeling? What's not quite right here? Having boundaries and a scope can help you protect your identity and your experiences. There might be some areas or subject matters you do not want to work with because they are painful or they're upsetting to you based on your identities or personal experiences. So setting clear boundaries about the things you won't work on means you can proactively describe that without having to disclose anything about yourself that you don't want to. It can help you work in line with your principles and your standpoints. There might be some areas or subject matters that you do not want to work with because they're not in line with your political, your religious, or other principles or standpoints. And having these can help you show up for others by showing up for yourself. So we can't take care of ourselves as well as we can if we don't know what our needs are and we don't know what our boundaries are. So not knowing our needs makes it hard to have reciprocal relationships with other people if we can't express, share, and understand our own needs and thereby other people's needs. So now that I've gone through why I think this is important, I'm going to take a moment for all of us to get ready to reflect and to write. You can do this in whatever way is comfortable to you. You want to lie down, stand up, go for a walk, camera on, camera off, paper and pen, laptop, doesn't matter. However you're comfortable. I'm going to go through now 6 different prompts, and I'm going to give us all a minute each to reflect and jot down some notes about the prompt. So whatever you write down, whatever you start to draft or sketch just now, we're going to use that in the manifesto section. So I'm just going to find my timer. Okay. So I'm going to show each prompt, set the timer for a minute, and then come back, go to the next one. Okay. I'm going to show us the first prompt now. So scope of practice prompt 1. Things I can do alone based on my training, experience, knowledge, and skills. Make a note of things that you can do alone based on your training, experience, knowledge, and skills. And the timer is on for a minute. Okay, that's a minute up. I'm going to move to the second prompt. Things I can do alone based on my training, experiences, knowledge, and skills, but I don't want to do. Timer is on for a minute. Okay, that's a minute up. I'm going to go to the third prompt now. Things I can do, but with support or with a collaborator. So these are things that you don't want to do alone or you prefer not to do alone. And I'm going to set the timer now. Okay, that's a minute up. I'm going to the fourth prompt now. Things I can't do because I don't have the training, experience, knowledge, or skills. And the timer is on. Okay, that's a minute up. Prompt 5. Things I won't do because they are upsetting to me or because they don't align with my principles. And I'm starting the clock. Okay, that's a minute up. And the final prompt. Things I aspire to do to develop my practice and work in the best interests of service users. And the clock has started. Okay, that's the minute up. So before we go into the next section, which is about manifestos and sketching your own manifesto, I'm just going to take a pause. I can't see any of you. So if you want to, I don't know if there's been any comments, if anyone wants to open the mic and say anything, I'll just give us a couple minutes before we go into the next thing, which is a different exercise.
Emily.
Hey.
Hey.
It's so good to see you. I found it really, the first two about doing stuff alone, I'm not sure whether other folks found that one like a challenge, because, you know, in an ideal world, we wouldn't be doing stuff alone. So I wanted to know how did people fall into that same kind of trap where I was writing stuff down. I was like, oh no, wait, actually, I don't really like doing that alone. I prefer to have people around. So I'd be interested to know if I wasn't the only one.
And is there a difference, Emily, between what you don't like to do alone, but what you're expected to do alone?
I think so. I think things like, so my background's in research, but I work with a lot of wonderful content folks. So, but things like analysis, you know, I often maybe get to do alone, but really, really do not like doing it alone because of bias, obvious things, ethics as well. And even just like, I feel like being alone introduces a bias that I don't feel super comfortable with. So I try to avoid it at all costs.
Yeah.
Cal?
Hi, I think for me, this kind of really brought around like minutes into this. But I'm a lone content designer in my team. And I think kind of reading this, not reading this, going through these prompts and being like, what do you want to do alone? What don't you want? What do you need? What do you want someone else to do? I'm like, oh, maybe I should try and see if I can get a wee team or some folk around that I can bounce ideas off so I don't have to do any of these things alone. Because it is nice to be able to do it with people and with just people in general, but especially in this context, other content design professionals. I can see Michelle is reacting to that. I know you're in a similar position. But yeah, no, it's interesting how quickly that realization is going to come about. But yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to open up the floor at the end, but I have some more. Those first two prompts are challenging for me, but I'll tell you why later. Keep you on tenterhooks. I know you're on a knife's edge to know. Okay, so we're going to move on to this thing about a manifesto. And again, I chose to put a manifesto as part of this workshop because it's something I've done for myself. When I was having some coaching and counseling, some things started to come out about boundaries and ways that I wanted to deal with anxiety and stress. And I actually made myself a zine that I keep on my desk. And it's that thing, like I said in the beginning, that I can reach for to remind myself of things I know make me feel better or boundaries that I want to keep. So it's almost like you're talking to yourself from the past in the future. So having something like a zine on my desk is really, really quite useful for me. And I started to think about manifesto because the scope of practice prompts can be quite pointed statements. And I thought that fit really well with a manifesto. Now, a dictionary definition of a manifesto is a written statement declaring publicly the intentions, motives, or views of its issuer. And I think, certainly me, when I think of a manifesto, I think of like really quite radical arts movement documents or communist manifesto or things that are really revolutionary, which they can be, and manifestos have a huge long history, but corporations also have manifestos, political parties have manifestos. Everybody's got a manifesto in some way, shape, or form, and they can be written in many, many different formats. But for tonight, and for this exercise, which I hope you carry forward, we're going to focus on list type manifestos, and I'll give you some examples. So this is a kind of typical old arts movement manifesto. And you can see on the left, it's numbered. It's 3A, 9, 1, 2, 3. So really sort of pointed, concise statements all the way through. Here's a manifesto I spotted in Glasgow, just outside of an art shop in the city center. And this is similar. It's not numbered, but it has very clear, bold statements throughout, putting forward how it thinks it should fill this town with artists. So it's putting its principles forward. It's putting its statements in these nice, concise packages through the document. Here's something that I took from a wonderful piece of work I think all of you should read. This is a long document. This is a very long manifesto, but there are elements throughout that have these numbered statements. And this is numbered, it's got a title, and then it's got a bit of text underneath. So that's another way that you could maybe format your manifesto. And this is something I've taken from White Pube, which is an amazing, well, I was going to say an artist collective. It's really two people working as White Pube, but they did a project where they came up with these ideas for the new art world. And you can see here, they're just 6 bold statements. And they also published this. So they've turned it into a booklet. So they have a visual element to their manifesto. And you can buy this from Rough Trade if you would like. So I wanted to sort of inspire you with different ways in which a manifesto can be presented. So get ready to draft a manifesto. Again, in any way you're comfortable. This time we're only having 3 prompts. And again, tonight is just to get you started thinking and drafting and creating. So we're going to have 3 prompts with 1 minute each for you to think, do a bit of writing. The first 2, I think you can maybe just start to experiment with a couple of things. And the third one, you might be able to get some fuller kind of writing done if you'd like. Okay. So manifesto prompt 1. Who is your manifesto for? Is it for yourself? Is it for people who might be looking at your website, your online profile on LinkedIn? Is it an appendix for your CV? Is it for your new project team? Again, you could put that together with your manual of me or something else. So have a think for a minute. Who is this first manifesto that you're drafting? Who is it for? If you imagine your audience. Okay, that's a minute up. I'm going to move to the second prompt. What is the tone of your manifesto? Is it just some ideas? It can be bold, hopeful, angry, funny, or something else. So for a minute, have a think. This first manifesto that you're playing with and you're drafting, what is the tone of it? Okay, that's the minute up. And our third prompt. So with the scope of practice statements or the points that you were making there, what are the openings for your manifesto that you can sort of tack on the front of those? So some ideas are, I want, this will be, I am, the world I want to see, I won't, there are, and I'm sure you could dream up loads more. But have a play with some of the things that you wrote as a boundary or a scope of practice and play around with making it a statement, manifesto type statement. Okay. So we're just going to take a pause because we're going into a different section now, which we're going to end with. So this session tonight was really rapid. If we did like a half-day session, we could go quite deep into different elements of what you've created or the questions that we're asking. So some things for you to try later if you want to keep developing this is if you've written anything in your scope of practice or in your boundaries that is from a negative perspective, some of it necessarily is because it's things you don't want to do or things you won't do. But if there's any other language there that's quite is put in a negative way, just play around with rephrasing that and from a positive aspect. Try different tones for different audiences. So you might want to just almost be a character, put on a persona, being someone who's really pissed off or somebody who's doing a stand-up routine. You know, your manifesto is a stand-up routine. Play around with different voices for different audiences and see how that sort of changes the way you see or can present your boundaries and your scope. And think about playing with the format as well. The world is your oyster. You could make a zine, a pamphlet, a chapbook. Could just be a list on an A4. You could draw or sketch, collage, audio, video. You can make a set of postcards. So all kinds of cool things you could do with your scope of practice as a manifesto. And play with the style itself. So there are different types of manifestos. Some of them are just block text. Some of them are quite visual. And consider also developing your manifesto further from just a set of statements to something like a writer. So I know we might all be familiar with like, you know, rock band writers or artist writers. I've put in the speaker notes 2 examples of writers. One is the speaker writer of somebody called Tatiana Mack, which is incredible. So that's a really good example of what a detailed writer can look like. And I've also put a link to a website that is disabled artists making writers for their accessibility needs. So that's another model that you could replicate in the different formats that people are using for their writers. So if you're interested in doing a deeper dive, again, this could be a half-day session. Contact me. I'm quite happy to do one-to-one sessions or facilitated group sessions. So it could be for your team or just a community of interest. And those longer sessions can include more exploratory prompts and time for actually doing craft or making a physical object, like a zine or something, however you want your manifesto to present itself. And that is me, all done. I'll be excited to see you all again. I haven't seen a face that whole time. I'm gonna stop presenting. Cool. We've got plenty of time to chat as well. I'm really interested to hear what people made of that. If anything surprising happened. Yeah, what happened when we're going through that? What did people find interesting, or what did you come up with?
Hal.
Hello. I think I shared mine in the wrong place, which is fine. Kind of shared my findings from the first part in the middle, in the pause, which is fine. But yeah, no, I think it was really, really interesting. I think it's kind of helped me get a clearer idea of myself and the kind of work I want to do, not necessarily content design related, just in everything. So that's very exciting. But no, it's been nice. I've also realised how horrible my handwriting is. So that's what's come out from this as well.
Michelle?
I found it really fascinating and I wanted to just keep going. So I'm glad you set the timer, Leah, because I would have just kept going. But I found, like Cal said, I work alone. So I'm the only person doing what I do. And so my answer to the first question was really, really long. But it was helpful for me to think through, out of all those things that I can do, there's a whole lot of them I don't want to do. And there's a whole nother segment of them that I want to do, but would rather do with a collaborator. And so then that gets me thinking, like, how can I do that? I mean, I can't go and say, hey, hire 6 people for me to work with, because that's going to go nowhere. I have said that. I tried just for one, but just in terms of thinking longer term, how can I define what really is most important to me? And then how can I move towards that? So when you were asking us, who's the manifesto for? I thought it needs to start with being for me, because until I figure out what I'm really all about and what's most important to me, I can't advocate for that with anybody else. So that's got me thinking, how can I spend some more time with this and figure that out? So it was really incredibly helpful. So thank you.
Emily?
I totally agree with what you were saying, Michelle. I was going to share the exact same thing, that it was like writing for myself. And I wrote it for prompt 2 around like what the tone was. Like I wanted it to be compassionate and clear, because like I wrote down to remind myself when I'm lost where to find me, you know, like where I care about my work, when I'm getting swept up in all the kind of stress and pressure, that actually like it would just be a physical like space or like object for me to come back to, and just, you know, like when I wrote the prompt of the opening statement, you know, don't forget who you are, here's a reminder. And also like a kind of a further prompt, like structuring those statements as a you are, like speaking to me, which I think is actually like, yeah, it feels like something that I definitely want to delve more into. And I think I also reflected on, if it was me coming back to it, is there a potential for a growth moment there too? So say I've learned something about myself that I want to update that manifesto with, and like acknowledging in that opening that I might be coming with a different lens, and that it's okay to maybe positively grow the manifesto in a different direction, as long as I felt like it was positive. So yeah, I find it super insightful and I really appreciate the space. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you both, all 3, for that. Emily just said something that made me think about like how these can evolve and how temporal and contextual they can be. So you could have many different manifestos for whatever it is you're doing, for your CD, for your project team, for yourself. And I like this idea of it being something that grows. You know, it doesn't have to, it can't be set in stone, actually. So I'm glad you said that, for us to think about. It's a thing that grows with you. It's malleable, it's changeable, it's contextual, it's, you know, temporal. It's a sort of moving, living thing.
Zoe?
Hi, this is my first Content Club talk that I've came to, and yeah, I just thought it was so beautiful. So, like, thank you. And just one thing that really stood out to me, I think, that feels, yeah, sort of really good to have noticed, is in the first sort of lot of exercises about the things that I don't want to do. I had written certain things. And then on the third prompt, things I can do with support or collaboration or a collaborator, some of those things came back in, and I remembered actually I really enjoy doing those things when I'm doing it with somebody else. So that was really yeah, I just felt like really good to notice. Actually, those aren't things I don't want to do. I just enjoy doing them when I'm doing them with somebody else. That's really good to notice. And yeah, just thanks so much. I found it like really beautiful and open, and I'm definitely going to continue to make this manifesto like for myself. I really liked what you were saying about having this zine on your desk, and I think, yeah, having something to reach for, to sort of remind myself of my own kind of values. Yeah, I think that's, yeah, I think it's going to be fun as well to make it. So yeah, just thank you, big thank you from me.
That's great, Zoe. Thanks. What a great session to land into.
Yeah, totally. I feel very lucky. Yeah, thank you.
The thing about doing things alone and things that you might not want to do alone, there's something to think about. Maybe it's more for researchers or content designers who work very closely with researchers, is to think about the communities of experience, geographical communities, the people that we are asked to engage through research, often are people we have no thing in common with. We are not part of their communities. We're sort of just coming in temporarily, sometimes obtrusively. So there's something to consider there in practice about not wanting to do something alone, because it might not be right to do something without a representative or a member of that community. So there's something about that sort of wider aspect of not working alone too that I just wanted to bring into the conversation, like as this develops, and thinking about your practice and the ethics of it, that not working alone can sometimes just be like an ethical issue with regard to research or communities of people that you don't have a connection with. And there's some things that, like, I don't facilitate well, except for tonight. Like, I wouldn't be in a big group activity alone. There's a lot of facilitation I've done alone in the past, and I shouldn't have, because people's relationships were a little too frizzy. And things just start coming up that I can't handle on my own. It feels really uncomfortable, so I don't do that anymore. And doing this exercise really helped me just state that. So that's been really useful.
Denise?
Sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, it's really interesting because I think to some degree, I've been kind of following my own sort of little personal manifesto in the back of my head for quite a while in terms of my career development and where I wanted things to go, and kind of writing myself some rules as to, no, I don't want to do that, or yeah, I'd like to do that, but I need this. And but yeah, I've never articulated it in that way before, so I think that's quite interesting, because that's kind of having these sorts of things in the back of my mind is kind of what's led me where I am now, and I'm currently in the process of applying for roles as a content designer in the government, and that's all kind of stemmed from this. So actually it'll be really interesting if and when I get one of those jobs, actually, what I've kind of achieved that. So then it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. I'm also just going to share something in the chat, which is a thing called the Ethical Move, which is a pledge that you can sign up to in if you work in marketing, to kind of, when you're selling or promoting things, to do it in an ethical way. And I think kind of quite a good example of that kind of manifesto. You're nodding as if you've heard of them before. Oh.
No, I just think that's great.
I put my hand up, so I had my hand up before, but it went down when I spoke. So Leah's going to know some of this stuff I talk about, but I struggle with doing this type of thing. So if anybody else does struggle with it, I don't think it's unusual, but it was great just sitting there, even just in a group of other people, not even in the same room, just working away, going and having that time. And I know I'm going to go back to it and do it again, and ask Leah to probably prompt me some more. But No, that was great. That was a round point. It was just, it's hard sometimes. It's the long and short of it. Is anybody else?
Just want to say this has been great.
It has some benefits and it has some negatives.
You're doing a workshop to divide the housework.
I mean, having the most perfect partner.
This has been really lovely. Yeah, really nice way to end Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you for everybody coming along. It's great to see some old faces I haven't seen in a while, and that was mainly to Milo. Hello, Milo. And I'm going to stop recording now. People can hang around for 5 minutes if they want to talk some more, but if not, we'll be announcing the next pep talk in the next 2 or 3 days, and that's going to be a barnstormer as well. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, folks.